All right, so today I'm going to talk about something that I really love, and I hope you guys can see how much I love this, and maybe you'll get excited about science too. So I'm going to talk about different careers that you can have in science. So just an idea, if you think that you're actually going to be interested in this talk and you really want to listen, maybe take out a piece of paper, and as I'm going through the slides, you're probably going to have some questions. And since I think there's a lot of you, it might be hard to get to questions during the slides. So just go ahead and jot down any questions that you have. And at the end of the presentation, I'm more than happy to go over anything that you guys want to go over. All right, so basically what we're going to go over today is who am I and how did I get to where I'm at today? Some career options for varying levels of education with a science background. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of advice on how to pick and get into good colleges. And then, like I said, I want to go over any questions. So please ask me questions at the end. All right, so just a little bit about me. My name's Jessica Devenport, formerly Jessica Neiswanger. I graduated from Clearwater in 2012. Following graduation, I attended Mineral Area Community College, where I got my Associate of Arts. After going to Mineral Area, I went to Southeast Missouri State University, and while I was there, I got my Bachelor's of Science in Biology, and I minored in Chemistry. Immediately after graduating from SEMO, I accepted a full-time position at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. And through an employee program that they offer, I got my Master's of Arts in Biology. I finished my Master's last December, and I accepted a position in a Ph.D. program in March, and I just started that this September. Started a little late because of COVID, but that's what I'm doing now. All right, so I'm going to try and be as realistic with you guys as possible, because I think it's important to know that your timeline doesn't have to be linear. I want to really tell you guys that it's okay to have setbacks during your education experience, and that having setbacks doesn't necessarily mean that you can't accomplish something that you want to do. So this is just to show you guys, my timeline was not linear. It was a little bit all over the place, but I'm still reaching the goals that I set for myself. All right, so I started my community college education while I was still in high school. So through Clearwater, and I'm sure they have this now, considering they had it 7 years ago when I was in high school. I took a lot of dual credit courses, every one that was offered, and also I took night courses in Fredericktown. By doing this, I was able to have a full year of college under my belt when I graduated. However, I was completely independent when I graduated, so I really used community college as an opportunity to figure out how to work full-time, how to pay my rent, and then also how I could fit all that in with college and studying, because I really didn't have to study much to get by while I was in high school. I was not in the top 10% when I was in high school. I pretty much did just what I could. I was working at night, like probably a lot of you are. And when I got to college, I totally had to shift what I knew about studying. So also just a side note, this shift in learning how to study really did have a negative impact on my GPA. So when I graduated from community college and transferred to SEMO, I was transferring in with a 2-point-something GPA, which is pretty low. I didn't really realize how much time I needed to be putting into studying, and that definitely changed later on. I also changed my major 3 or 4 times. So really all I could see when I was going into community college was dollar signs, and I knew, rent costs X amount. I cannot afford to move to St. Louis and pay my rent. So what is the quickest way that I can get there? And so that I can make more money, and then if I want to do something else, then I can afford to put myself through school and live wherever. That kind of led me down a lot of rabbit holes, which in hindsight I would not do again. If I had stuck with biology, which was the very first class I took at Fredericktown, and I knew I loved it, then I wouldn't have had all of the sort of loops around my timeline at the beginning, I would have probably just went, straight to SEMO or another 4-year college, either right out of high school or immediately after graduating with my associates. So most importantly, I figured out that I love science. Mineral area has some science research, mostly with like fly genetics, which allows you to understand a lot of basic mechanisms of how things work in science. And I thought that was super cool. So that was kind of what prompted me to select my major as biology when I went to SEMO. So here's just a huge list of basic generic classes that you can take as an undergrad. You can take these classes pretty much at any university. And what I'm just trying to show you guys here is that if you decide you want to major in biology, there are a ton of options for you. So you can do everything from like study of viruses, which is going to be virology, or studying like neurobiology, which is the study of the brain, all the way over to pharmacology, which studies how drugs work, or even studying something like bioinformatics, which is taking computer applications to analyze biological data. So bioinformatics is a hot field right now. If you think you might ever be interested into that, you could get a job without a doubt. So this is just a picture of me and my husband from when I graduated from SEMO. This was a big accomplishment for me. I was really excited to get my bachelor's degree. So just a little bit of a takeaway. When I went to SEMO, I did not waste my time going to parties, doing all that stuff. I really had figured out by that point that I was passionate about science and that I needed to do everything I could to establish my career in science after I graduated. So when I wasn't working, I was in the lab. And in order to get into labs, you really need to make connections. So when I started going to SEMO, I got on a first name basis with the faculty. I knew them all very well. I would stay after class to ask questions, visit during their like hours that they're open outside of class. And through this, I was really able to get involved in a lot of different research projects. So I got involved in some chemistry projects, several different lab projects. And also, because I knew the biology chair and, chatted with him regularly after class and stuff, he knew that I was looking for a job. So the first couple years I was at SEMO, I worked full-time, but it was split into 2 different jobs. So I would work at the hospital there doing IT, and then every weekend I would drive home and I would work at Town and Country. So that got really exhausting. I was really going a lot. So he knew that I was looking for another part-time position that would allow me to get involved in science at SEMO. And so he offered me a job in the microbiology lab. It was pretty basic. I was just washing test tubes, but I was also setting everything up for all the classes. And that experience really helped me out later on. And also through those connections, I was able to get connected with somebody at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And for me, this was important because I'd started looking over job descriptions and what was required when I was applying to jobs after I graduated. And I knew that I wanted to work in cancer research of some sort. And I didn't necessarily know what that looked like, but a lot of cancer research labs use animal models as a way to study cancer. So I really needed to have some experience handling animal systems. And I couldn't get that at SEMO because that's just not something that they did. They are mostly fly genetics, or they do a lot of chemistry, but nothing in terms of that. So they got me in touch with someone in Carbondale. It's about an hour drive from Cape. So I would drive over to Carbondale a couple of days a week before, I would get up pretty early and go over there. And I got involved in some projects that some PhD students were doing there. Also, 6 months before I graduated, I really got to know the people in the career office. So this was fantastic because the resume that I wrote up before I went to the career office was not great. And they helped me build a solid resume. They helped me write cover letters, and they also did mock job interviews with me so that I was 100% ready whenever I went to my interviews later on. And also 6 months before graduation, once I had all those documents made, I applied for like 30 positions. I'm a little bit type A, so I was trying to just make sure I had all my bases covered. And just to give you guys some context, out of the 30 positions I applied for, I got 10 interviews. I didn't go to all 10 because I ended up accepting the third job interview that I went to because I was really interested in what they were doing and I thought I would really be happy there. All right, and this is a lot of information. I'm not putting this up here to go through it all with you guys. I just really want you to see how many different job options there are with a bachelor's degree in biology. You can do so many different things, from working with plants to editing scientific papers. You could do pharmacology, which I said before, exercise therapy. You know, a zoologist, people with bachelor's degrees work at the zoo. There's tons of different jobs here. You could even do like medical illustration. So somebody has to draw those pictures that are in your textbooks, and you have to understand what's happening biologically in order to be able to draw a good picture. So that's a pretty cool job if you're interested in art. However, for me, I knew I wanted to be in biomedical research. I knew at the end of the day, whether it was 5 years after I graduated or immediately after I graduated, which is what turned out happening, I wanted to do cancer research. So for me, that really narrowed down the list of jobs that I was looking for. So the most common job in biomedical science after graduating college with a bachelor's degree is to become a research technician. This can either be at a university or in industry. In industry, in the context of science, means like you're working for some sort of company that like does drug design, or like a list of those companies here would be Pfizer, Bayer Monsanto, which really works a lot more with plants, the Cortex, which is downtown in St. Louis, and this is a huge community with young entrepreneurs who are starting up their own biomedical science company, and also Millipore Sigma. And I just want to highlight that all of these companies are in St. Louis, and I went to school with a ton of people that, you know, immediately after graduation got a job at Millipore Sigma, making good money, immediately got a job at Pfizer. Bayer Monsanto is always hiring. These jobs are super common for people to get, and they're pretty easy to get because there's so many job options out there. Also, more on the university side of things, as a research technician working for a university, you basically work for a doctor, whether that be someone that has a Ph.D. or an M.D., and you're just trying to make their ideas that they have come to life, whatever that consists of in terms of science. If they have a great idea that is going to lead to possibly new treatment options, that might go to a clinical trial. So here at WASHU, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this because I was not until I came here, but WASHU, Siteman Cancer Center, and Barnes Jewish Hospital are all one and the same. They're all in the same group of buildings, and they all work together. So an idea that's developed at Washington University in St. Louis can be put into a clinical trial at Siteman or at Barnes. Whenever you get a clinical trial, you have to have people that are able to process the samples like blood draws or bone marrow draws from those patients to see whether or not the treatment is working. So you can work in a lab processing those clinical samples, or you can also work as a clinical coordinator. And a clinical coordinator is someone who, with a bachelor's degree, is going to dress in business attire. You're going to go into the clinic where the patients are. You're going to get to see the patients and you're going to get to talk to them. And also you might take this clinical samples that you get from the doctor's office into the lab, and sometimes you process them, sometimes you hand them off to someone else to do the processing. So my first job was as a research technician at Washington University School of Medicine / Siteman. I put this up here because I wanted to highlight that I came in as a research technician too. So because I was involved in a lot of research projects as an undergrad, and because I worked in the microbiology lab at SEMO, that gave me some work experience before I ever even graduated. So the job description for this position required that I had 2 years of work experience after graduation. So those guidelines are not always set in stone, because clearly, since I was applying for this job 6 months before I graduated, I definitely didn't have 2 years of experience. But they looked at things like, oh, side note, I didn't have a great GPA coming out of SEMO. My overall GPA was a 2.9. So that wasn't something that I put on my resume. In hindsight, I definitely would have worked harder at SEMO to have a higher GPA, and my timeline may have been condensed a little bit, and I would be probably doing the same thing, just at a quicker rate. So yeah, so I applied for this job, and really what they saw was my work ethic, the passion that I had for science, and my drive and like excitedness to learn new things. That allowed me to get a job that I was not qualified for. And once I had this job, I worked on CAR T cell development for the treatment of hematologic malignancies. So hematology is the study of blood, and hematologic malignancies refers to leukemia, which is cancer of your white blood cells. So there's 2 main schools of cancer here. There's solid tumors, which would be something more like breast cancer or lung cancer, or brain cancer. And then there's leukemias. So leukemias are considered liquid tumors because it's a cancer that's growing in your bloodstream or in your bone marrow. All right, so we're going to get into the weeds a little bit here. If you guys have any thoughts or questions, or what I'm saying doesn't make sense, just jot it down, and I'm happy to answer any questions after this. So what is CAR T cell therapy? When I applied for this job, I had absolutely zero clue what I was going to be doing. So a CAR T cell, CAR T stands for chimeric antigen T cell receptor. So T cells are a type of white blood cell that everybody has. And these cells are responsible for killing bad cells in your body. So this could be cells that are infected with like a virus or something, or cells that are changing, that are in the process of becoming a cancer cell. Through genetic engineering, there's a lot of different ways you can genetically engineer cells now. Your T cells can actually be reprogrammed to, instead of killing an infected cell, they can be redirected to target cancer cells. All right, so how would you reprogram a T cell? So these reprogramming allows you to put these fake little arms, like you can kind of see here, present on the surface of T cells. Oops. Once you put these arms on the T cell can then find the cancer and grab onto the cancer cells. Once the T cells have grabbed on, they're going to replicate themselves. So there's a whole bunch of them, and then they're just going to attack your cancer. And the thought here is that CAR T cells are a way of eliminating your cancer without having to give you chemotherapy or other really toxic drugs. So we're going to go through this here. I'm going to turn my pointer on. Okay, so this is a little bit technical, which my husband told me was kind of hard to follow last night when I was practicing this talk. So if you have any questions, let me know. We're going to start here with this person. So this person represents a cancer patient that would come into the clinic. Pheresis is where their blood is drawn. So similar to like if you were to donate blood to the Red Cross, they're going to draw your blood. Then they use this type of equipment that spins your blood into different layers in a tube. Once your blood is separated into different layers, you can isolate all of the white blood cells. So your white blood cells are made up of several different cell types. It's not all T cells. And using special beads and a really strong magnet, you're able to separate out your T cells from the rest of your white blood cells. Once you have your T cells separated out, you put these fake beads on them. So these beads, they sort of act like an artificial infection. And the purpose of that is once they see these, they're gonna say, hey, we need to grow and we need to make more of ourselves so that we can fight the infection. So in the context of this, you use that to get more and more and more T cells so that you can generate a large amount of CAR T cells for the patient. So once you've activated your T cells, you then put them in a liquid, that kind of looks like Kool-Aid. It's not, but it's red. And this media, which is what the liquid is called, contains growth factors that will feed the T cells and allow them to rapidly increase in numbers. So once they've grown up and you have a whole bunch, like millions and millions of T cells in a dish, you can use a virus to deliver the arms that I was talking about in the previous slide to the T cells. Once these T cells receive the arms from the virus, they're able to put them up on their surface, and then at this point, they're considered CAR T cells. So once you have your CAR T cells, they undergo rigorous quality control to make sure that they're working right, to make sure that everything is good and going to be safe to put back into the patient. And once that's all done, you then, like you would do with an IV bag, you reinfuse the patient's T cells that are now turned into CAR T cells back into them. And this will allow the CAR T cells to kill the cancer within the patient. So this little girl here was diagnosed with a type of leukemia, which, just to remind you, is a cancer of white blood cells, when she was very small. So this is a picture of her here where she was really sick. A lot of times CAR T cell therapy now is used after chemotherapy has failed. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, chemo does not necessarily cure cancer. A lot of people relapse, and you really need to think of new ways to treat these patients because they're not going to respond to the drugs that everyone else gets. So at the University of Pennsylvania, this little girl was the first patient to be treated with CAR T cell therapy for her leukemia. Just a little fun fact, I worked with the guy that originally made this CAR T cell therapy, and his wife is currently my boss, and she treated, her name is Emily, she went by Emma. She treated Emma in the clinic when she was staying at the hospital receiving this CAR T cell therapy. So the CAR T cell therapy worked for her, which is fantastic. This picture is actually old. The most recent one I could find is from her holding a sign saying she's 7 years cancer-free. That means she's had no relapses, and that means she's able, importantly, to live a normal life and not really have to worry about her cancer coming back. I'm sure they still check it, but you know, it hasn't came back yet. So the lab I was working in was looking at different kinds of arms that you could put on the T cell. This would allow you to target different types of cancers, and hopefully could lead to more patients that might not have responded to the other therapy to respond to this kind of therapy. So in order to do this in a preclinical setting, we use mouse models. Mice reproduce very quickly. You know, it's not a 9-month gestation period. You can have mice continually going. They reproduce every couple weeks. So it works out really well for us. So what we do is we kind of put this glowing thing into the cancer cells. And this glowing factor in the cancer allows us to use a really special camera to image the tumor burden in the mice. So here, looking at the box on the left, this is what it looks like in the mice when they just have cancer. So you can see by down here, their cancer is really bright. This means that they have a really high burden of cancer, and they died shortly after this picture was taken. Here, I'm not sure how familiar you are with scientific terms, but this is a control that we used. This CAR T cell therapy had arms that were not designed to grab onto the cancer. We do this as sort of a negative control, just to make sure that the findings that we're going to find with our positive control are actually working. So here, we were not expecting to see regression of the cancer, which is exactly what happened. However, over here on the right, this is the new CAR T that we developed, that I developed in the lab alongside my boss. And we gave these mice leukemia, and then we treated them with these CAR T cells. And what we found was that even though the mice had established leukemia when we treated them. The CAR T cells were able to kill the leukemia, and the mice were able to live much longer than the mice who did not receive our new therapy. So I just wanted to share this slide because I think it's super cool. So I did this CAR T cell therapy when it was still, being done in dishes, being done on mice. And I worked in the lab for 3 years, so I followed it through the course of its development. And this is my friend Julia. She started in the lab about 2 years after I did. And she started in the lab immediately after she graduated from Mizzou. She got a bachelor's of science in biology. This was her first job. She worked processing clinical samples and eventually transitioned over to technician because she wanted to get a little bit more involved in the science. But this is a picture of Julia here at WASHU in St. Louis making CAR T cells. So what's really cool about this, like I told you guys with the picture of the bag, these CAR T cells are the first CAR T cells in the United States. They're going to be delivered to patients that target this specific type of leukemia. So I just think that's really cool. How many people can say, I made the first CAR T cells ever in the country to be put into patients for this type of cancer? And she can. And she did that with a bachelor's degree. And if I had not went on to school, it's possible that I could also have been working on this project, which is just so exciting. So importantly for me, once I got into the lab, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to get a PhD. I didn't know if I wanted to get my master's or just stay at tech. I even debated whether I wanted to teach high school students. I just really wasn't sure. So I ended up falling in love with science and falling in love with cancer research. And something that happens when you work for a university is you get involved in these projects, and then these projects get written up and they get published. And because I had such a low GPA as an undergrad, having these publications on my resume really helped me stand out from my competitors when I was applying for programs. So this doesn't mean much to you guys, but these two papers here, I'm a co-author on both of them. I'm right down here and then over here. These were published in Nature Leukemia, which is a really prestigious journal. It was really cool for me to get on these papers, and I was super grateful that I got to work on these projects. And importantly, these 3 other papers are going to be published pretty soon. So this project here I did from start to finish by myself with the help of my boss, Matt Cooper. I wrote up a lot of the paper. I would have written up more, but COVID happened and I got furloughed. But I did all the studies from before it was ever even in mice to when it went into mice, all the way to publication. And then I also did all of the work for this project in terms of the mouse studies, as well as this one. So I really got a ton of experience. And if I had not had this experience, I really don't think that I would have gotten into the PhD program that I'm in now. So once I decided that I wanted to get a PhD, I had to do something about my crappy GPA. A 2.9 is not going to cut it when you're applying for a PhD program. In order to kind of circumvent that, I decided that I was going to get my master's degree, and I was going to work really hard while I was getting my master's to make sure that I had a perfect GPA. So WASHU has a program that they offer their employees, and it's a program where they pay for 50% of your master's, and then you take courses in the evenings. My master's took me about 2 years, 1.5 years to finish. I worked really hard. I would get off work after working a full day, go to school until like 10 o'clock at night, and then drive home and do it again the next day. It was a lot of work, but I got my master's for roughly $10,000. So WASHU paid $10,000 and I paid $10,000. And I'm sure you guys aren't familiar with the cost of getting a master's degree, but this is super, super cheap. So I also wrote my thesis for my master's on CAR T cell therapy, and this was fantastic. It helped my work because I really started to learn more about how things were working. And importantly, I took a couple cancer biology classes while I was in my master's. So I took a basic cancer biology course and an advanced cancer biology course. And the professor of those classes is the director of the cancer biology program at WASHU. So I took his classes. I was really involved. I asked a ton of questions, met with him after class with my questions. I asked him to be on my thesis committee, and because I got to know him really well, he wrote me recommendation letters when I was applying to PhD programs. And it's, you know, pretty cool how it worked out, because if the director of a program is writing you a recommendation letter, your chances of getting in are a lot higher, or at least getting an interview are a lot higher than those who don't have that. And I learned a ton about cancer biology. So if there was ever any doubt in my mind that I wanted to study cancer, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind by the time I was done with my master's. I loved it. I loved going to class. It was just something I really enjoy doing. Hold on one second. Okay, so I wanted to go over jobs that you can have in the biomedical field with a master's degree. So there's two trains of thought here. You can either go into industry, which I said in terms of science refers to a company, or you can go into academia, which is going to refer to a job that you can get while you're in a university. So just a little bit of an idea here. These are jobs that you can get in St. Louis. You know, Millipore Sigma, Bayer, all these places hire people with master's degrees, and those people make a ton of money. You can be a chemist. So SEMO, you can get your master's in chemistry while you're at SEMO if you decide that that's something that you like. I personally don't like chemistry a whole lot, so that wasn't for me. But I do know several people from SEMO who became chemists at Millipore and at Bayer. You can do biochemistry, which does a little bit more biology. Natural sciences, that refers more to like wildlife, or a job that you would get with like a state park, or just researching, you know, how wildlife can be managed and tracked and all of that good stuff. And then epidemiologists study diseases. So epidemiologists have been really important during COVID because they're studying how the disease spreads, how it can be managed, and all that stuff. So they've saved tons of lives. And also they make quite a bit of money, and their jobs are growing. So if you decide you're interested in this, by the time you get done with school, there's going to be jobs available for you, and there's going to be jobs available for you in St. Louis, or in other places if you decide you want to live somewhere else around the country. For me, I want to stay in academia. So with a master's degree, I could have become a research technician, a senior version of that. So I would have just had more responsibilities compared to what I was doing before. I could have became a lab manager. So a lab manager isn't just like a manager anywhere else. You know, it's just going to be like a manager at Town and Country, except for instead of managing a grocery store, you're managing a lab. So you do product orders for the lab. You're in charge of managing the people that are within the lab. This is particularly important during COVID because only a certain amount of people are allowed to be in the lab at a time in order to maintain social distancing rules. And you're in charge of like funding and figuring all of that stuff out. It's not particularly something I was interested in, but it's definitely a job that every lab has a lab manager, and there's hundreds and hundreds of labs at WashU. Also, you could be a staff scientist. Mostly staff scientists are positions that are held by people with a Ph.D., but someone with a master's degree could theoretically become staff scientist. So if you're going to be a staff scientist, you're going to have a little bit more control over deciding the project that you're working on. And you're going to have a little bit more creativity in saying, hey, I think this thing might be cool in cancer and I want to figure out what it does. You might be able to do that more easily as a staff scientist. And I just wanted to throw product sales up here because although I am not interested in product sales, it's a pretty cool job to have. I had a friend from SEMO that got involved with product sales, and those people travel all over the country visiting different institutions, you know, universities, companies, whatever, and they have to have some sort of basic knowledge of how biology works so that they can explain how their hundreds of thousands of dollar piece of equipment works. So they go around They get free lunches for all these places, free flights, all that stuff, and they work on filming these products. All right, so why did I want to be in school until I'm more than 30? Because I love science, first of all, in case that's not clear. And I really wanted to pursue my own ideas. So I really like to think creatively, you know, whether that's in terms of like creative thinking in terms of decorating or being artistic, but thinking creatively is also something that's super important in science. So as a tech, I was starting to get all these ideas like, hey, maybe we could try this, or maybe we could try this, and it might be cool and maybe can lead to a new treatment. And you can't really do that as a tech. You have to more figure out the ideas and work on the ideas that your boss is giving you. So I want to be able to pursue my own ideas, and eventually I want to have my own lab, so that the hope is that eventually I'll have so many ideas that I can't possibly work on them all myself. And I want to hire people that can help me make my ideas happen. Hi, I'm giving a talk. Thanks. And also importantly, I don't want to be taking out more student loans. You know, I've had to take out student loans for my undergrad and for my master's, and that's just not feasible for me to continue doing. So as a PhD student, especially a PhD student in a STEM field, you get paid to go to school. So these salaries can range from $20,000 if you're going to somewhere like Southern Illinois University. Southern Illinois University is not as prestigious of a PhD program, which is why you get paid less. They just don't have as much funding as other schools, or all the way up to $40,000 a year. So here at WASHU, I get roughly $30,000 a year to get my PhD. The variability in what you would be making largely comes from the cost of living where you're at, or just program specific. So the cost of living here in St. Louis is relatively cheap compared to other major cities in the country, which is why the stipend is actually really good for this area, because you can make $30,000 and live pretty comfortably. Whereas $30,000 in, say, California or Chicago isn't going to get you as far, and you might have to have roommates to make ends meet. So, like when I applied for jobs, when I was applying for PhD programs, I applied to roughly 13 programs. I had spent a lot of time on this because I really wanted to get in somewhere, and I wasn't sure what schools were going to think of me. So I had like tiers of schools that I was applying to. I applied to schools like Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, just smaller schools that I thought I'm definitely going to get into these schools if I apply to them. So if I don't get in to one of my top choice schools, you know, these I can fall back on. And then I had a group of mid-range schools that I'm like, you know, I can probably get in here. I don't really want to go to these schools, but they're better schools than the other ones. So, you know, I'm still going to apply. And then I applied to several top tier schools. I mean, when you consider Washington University is the best school for genetics in the country. It's on par with Ivy League schools. So whether you think of WASHU, you think of it like Harvard, MIT, Yale, they're all kind of one and the same, which is cool for you guys if you're interested in it, because you could go to such a prestigious school and only be 2 hours away from home. So yeah, I applied to all these schools. I got a ton of interviews. And when you get the interviews, they pay for everything. They fly you into the school. So like I applied to a school in Colorado. They flew me into Colorado. They pay for your dinner for an entire weekend. They take you out on excursions to see the town, because they're trying to sell their school to you. They want you to go there if they're inviting you out for an interview. And it was just a really fun couple of months where I toured a bunch of different schools. I ended up getting accepted to everywhere I applied except for 2 schools. So it was a lot of traveling, but it was a ton of fun. And at the end of the day, WASHU was the best school that I applied to that I got into. So I did not get into the University of Chicago, and I did not get into Michigan State. So those are pretty competitive, and I guess they just, which was totally fine because I really wanted to go to WASHU anyways. It was my first choice school. Between WASHU and St. Jude. St. Jude was also really cool, and that's in Memphis, which is 2 hours away from Piedmont, in case you're wondering. I think it's roughly 2 hours from you guys, maybe 4. So like I said, I get a stipend, and it's about $30,000 a year. If I get a grant or something next year, which is something I'm applying for, that'll go up to $35,000 a year. And I also get free health insurance. And so on average, a PhD in STEM takes about 5 years. This is totally fine because whether I was getting PhD or not, I'm still going to be working in a lab. But at the end of this 5 years, I'm going to have a degree. So I think that's super cool. And I don't have to have another job outside of this. I literally go to school, I get paid to study, and I get paid to come to the lab and figure stuff out every day, which is just amazing to me. And on average, this takes 5 years. Sometimes, you know, it can take longer, and that's totally fine. It rarely takes shorter. I guess you could go 4 years, but really you're trying to take your time. And as a PhD student, you're trying to learn how to be fully independent as a scientist so that you can be successful when you graduate. So if it were to take you, you know, as long as you wanted to get your PhD, you're guaranteed that stipend and that health insurance for the entire time. So I was concerned when COVID hit that I might not get paid or I might not get health insurance. And when I signed on to do this PhD program, it guarantees my salary for the next 5 years. So, let's see. Okay, so during your PhD, you do a little bit of coursework. So I'm doing 2 courses per semester. That's a very light course load. It's not that difficult at all. And the rest of the work week, I'm in lab. So trying to figure out what the lab's doing. And as a first year student, I'm going to rotate through a few different labs to try and find a really good fit to make sure that I get along with my boss and that I'm excited about the science that they're doing. And then I just wanted to put this in here because I think it's super cool. This is the very first year that Washington University School of Medicine has had a cancer biology program. So I'm in the inaugural class for this, and I was one of the first 5 students to get accepted. Another student on here, Molly, also went to SEMO. She got her master's there. So I think that's pretty cool. And we're all doing pretty well in the program so far. Okay, so what am I studying right now? Again, we're gonna go into the weeds just a little bit here on the science. But so basically you have your cell, and when you get a viral infection, the virus will bind to your cell and then inject its DNA into your cell. So once that DNA is injected as a single strand, you've got these guys over here in yellow whose job it is to see that and to cause mutations on this DNA, which will lead to it being chewed up by other things in your cell. And basically what that means is this guy's job is to make it so that if your cell gets infected with a virus, it's destroyed and doesn't, like the virus is going to be destroyed, so your cell doesn't become this infectious cell that's going to infect other cells in your body. Importantly, this guy, he always lives in your cell. Sometimes he makes mistakes. You know, everyone makes mistakes, and so does this protein. So whenever you have your DNA here, your double-stranded DNA, which is what's in every single cell that you have as a human, occasionally it gets unwound. And when that happens, he sees that and he's like, that's a single-stranded DNA. I have to cause mutations on that because it's not supposed to be there. Realistically, it is supposed to be there because your DNA is getting replicated, but he doesn't know that. So he's just gonna start chopping stuff up and making mutations there. So what happens when you get mutations in your cell? You know, when you think of mutants, you might think of like a guy with 3 heads or something like that. But realistically, in everyday life, what happens when you get mutations is your cells with mutations freak out, and they either can become cancer cells or they're going to kill themselves. This is important because if you have a cell with all these mutations, what you want to be happening is you want the cell to say, oh my gosh, I am not normal. Something is very wrong here. I don't want to become a cancer cell, so I'm just going to apoptose, which means cell death. So what happens, and what we see a lot of the times, is that children that come to the clinic with leukemias often have this guy mutating their DNA. So what can we do about that? I mean, if most of the patients that are children that are coming into our lab with cancer have this guy in their cells hurting their DNA, there's got to be something that we can do. So the lab I'm in now is really trying to study that guy in yellow to try and figure out how we can make the cells, when he messes up, how we can make that cell say, yeah, I can't keep on going, I'm just going to apoptose, instead of turning into a childhood leukemia. So it's pretty cool, and I am super excited about this project. I'm really enjoying my time in the lab. It ends at Thanksgiving, so then I'll go on to a different lab, but after the first year, if I still love this project as much as I do now, it's very likely that I will pick this lab to spend the next 4 years of my PhD in. All right, so this is just kind of here if you thought that was cool, you want to reflect on what I said. I know it's a lot, and I know it's a lot to take in, and also it's been a while since I've been your age, so I might assume you guys know things that maybe you don't know. So here's just some information on what I just said if you want to read it later. Okay, so importantly, how can you guys become scientists? The number one thing you can do once you get into college is to get lab experience. I told you guys how many projects I was involved in and how important that lab experience was in driving my career. So find a school that's going to allow you to major in biology or a biomedical field. Pretty much every school is going to have this option. So once you pick a school and you get accepted, and you start taking your biology courses, you really want to start to get to know the faculty. This is important. They write your reference letters. The biology chair at SEMO wrote a reference letter for me when I was applying for my PhD 4 years after I graduated with my bachelor's. So I kept in contact with them. You know, if I had something important that was happening in my career, I sent them an email and said, hey, this is what I'm doing now. I thought you just, you know, might want to be kept in the loop. And also, you want to research what labs are studying. For example, in hindsight, as much as I loved SEMO, they don't really study cancer biology. So there wasn't really any lab that I was super excited about what they were doing versus like schools like WASHU in St. Louis or like St. Louis University or schools all over the country really. They have labs that are studying stuff like cancer biology or whatever you might be interested in that their undergrads get to work in. So we have 2 undergrads in our lab right now. They spend a couple days a week in our lab and they're getting experience studying cancer biology before they ever even graduate. So say you want to go to one of these schools but you don't get accepted, that's okay, because students from SEMO, students from Mineral Area College or whatever can email faculty at schools like WASHU and SLU, and they can work on projects during the summer. So a lot of times this could mean not getting paid though for the summer or having to work a job at night. So if that's something that's feasible, that's definitely something you can do. Summer opportunities are great for undergrads. But importantly, there are tons and tons and tons of paid summer internships for undergraduate students. So you would be getting paid to do your job, which would be to be working in a lab. All right, so advice for me, because I've been there, You know, teachers want to help you. I didn't realize this when I first started going to mineral area, and even when I first transferred to CMO. I thought, you know, this material is hard, I'm not doing well, and that's just it. You know, I guess I'm just going to have bad grades in college. And that's just simply not the case. If you're excited about what you're learning, and you're excited to, maybe you're not excited about what you're learning, but you're excited to learn, the teachers want to hear from you. You know, they want to help you succeed, but they can't do that if you're not talking to them. So also as a high school student, in the last lab I was in, we had a high school student email our lab and say, hey, what you're studying is really cool. I don't know much about it, but I would love to learn more. So people from our lab met with that high school student, and it really showed a lot of drive. I mean, we were so impressed that that high school student was showing interest so young. And just important to remember that if you want to go into the biomedical science field, undergraduates from schools like WASHU or other elite schools, they're spending 1 to 2 years in a lab studying advanced science. So when you go to a school, whether it be anywhere, you're going to want to do as much as you can to get involved to make sure you get enough lab experience to make yourself competitive for the job market. So like I said, even if you go to a community college, you can still get lab experience at a fancy lab, and just stay connected and make yourself competitive. So I'm putting this in here because when I was in high school, I thought there was absolutely no way that I would be able to afford to go to a four-year university. And because of that, I didn't, you know, I did apply for a lot of local scholarships, and I did get several local scholarships, but at the end of the day, you know, a $500 scholarship is not going to be able to put you through school. So you really need to be thinking about applying for those scholarships, and also applying to things that is school specific. So I didn't do that. And I thought there was no way I was going to get these scholarships. And because of that, I didn't even apply. And just a cost breakdown here, SEMO, Missouri State, and Truman, these are all Missouri schools. I kind of tried to list the best schools in Missouri up here. Room and board plus your tuition is going to be about $18,000 a year. Schools like Mizzou are closer to 24. SLU and WASHU are both private schools. They're not state schools, and they cost a lot of money. However, these schools have a ton of programs so that you don't have to pay a dime to go. Washington University is one. Obviously I work here, I go to school here, and I love it. So I know a little bit more about this than other schools. But WASHU has a program called the WASHU Pledge. So basically what the WASHU Pledge is saying is it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you come from or anything like that. All that matters is where you're going. So if you want to go to WASHU and you know there's no way you would be able to afford it, I would not be able to afford it if I wasn't getting tuition assistance. WASHU is going to let you go to school for free. So the kicker is that you have to get accepted. It's a very prestigious school. Like I said, it's on par with the Ivies. So you've got to make yourself competitive. But if you can get in and you show you're passionate about learning and just really excited to see where your life's going to take you in terms of school, WASHU is going to see that. And if they accept you, you get scholarships and grants that cover your tuition, any fees associated with going to school, because every school's got fees, room and board, meaning you could live here for free, guaranteed for the entirety of your undergraduate career. This is huge. That's 4 years. I mean, if you're thinking $75,000 of free money per year. In addition to that, this isn't going to be in the form of loans, so you're not going to have to pay it back. I took out a lot of loans as an undergrad, not as much as like some people I know, but I'm going to have to pay those back, and this would be free. And they have a ton of startup grants, So if you're saying, yeah, that's great, I can afford to live there and I can afford to go to school now because it's free, but I've still got to eat, you know, still got to pay my car insurance, still got to pay for gas. I don't have a computer. How am I going to do this? There's grants to cover all of the extra expenses they're going to be associated with going to school. So you think $2,000 a year going towards computer, food, gas, everything you can think of, it can really be budgeted and used well so that you can afford to go to school. Schools like St. Louis University and Mizzou have similar projects. I don't think they're as extensive as Washington University's, but it's something you could definitely look into. And students that go to SEMO, I think when I was looking this up, the statistic is that 97% of students that apply to SEMO and apply for financial aid get it. So the Copper Dome Scholarship essentially means, if I'm remembering correctly, that you can get your education for free. I didn't look into this a whole lot, but it's definitely on their website. So at the end of the day, don't be limited by where you think you can go. Apply to everywhere that you think you might want to go and then see what happens. So apply for every single scholarship you find. So if you're looking at going to school and you don't think you're going to get into a certain college, apply to it anyways. And also pick backups. So go to those schools' websites, look at their financial aid resources, and apply to every scholarship they have. You know, reasons why students don't apply and why students don't get money for school is are listed here. So this one is just ridiculous. It's so stupid. Everywhere has deadlines. You've got deadlines when you got to turn your homework in. You got deadlines when you got to be at work at a certain time. Deadlines for turning in scholarships are hard deadlines. You can't say, oh, I forgot and I got busy. Can I email it in later? No, you can't. You're not going to get that money now. So apply early. I applied to my PhD programs 2 months before the due date. And similarly with scholarships, once the money's gone, it's gone. So if you apply early, you're more likely to get awarded funding versus someone that applies the day it's due. So scholarships are only for elite students. This is not true. There are so many factors that go into determining who's going to get a scholarship. You know, whether your work ethic is fantastic, say you work so much outside of school that your grades suffered. That's okay because you have a great work ethic. You know, that's something that's going to make you stand out. Definitely doing well in school and having a good GPA is going to help that, but your work ethic is going to show. Also being passionate about what you're applying to do. That's going to show through when you're applying to these schools, and people that are awarding scholarships are going to see that. See those qualities in you. All right, I don't want to be rejected. That's just tough. Everyone gets rejected. I got rejected. It just happens, and you're just going to have to get over it and realize that being rejected is worth the possibility of winning $75,000 a year for school. There is a lot of competition, so you got to make yourself competitive. I've kind of talked about some of that here, and it does take a long time to apply. So you have to think, all right, if this award is for, say, $5,000 and it takes you 2 to 3 hours to write up your essay, and then you spend time getting it proofread, making sure it's a solid application, think about, all right, I don't know about you, but I am not going to be making $5,000 in 3 hours. So maybe consider that, and instead of doing something else on a weekend or two, sit down and think, these scholarships are worth a ton of money, and you know, they have to award this money to somebody, and so why not you? You know, every single one of you, no matter what you want to do, whether you think you don't even want to go to college at all, should consider the fact that you could get to go to school for free and that you deserve a good education if that's something that you want to pursue. So here's a list of links about how to apply for scholarships, and they'd be really helpful to just look over. It is kind of a confusing process sometimes. And then importantly, I'm going to just reiterate this, is to make yourself competitive. You know, it's not always about grades, but grades certainly help. You have to make yourself stand out, because if you're applying against a bunch of people, the people reading the essays are going to be reading thousands of essays, and if they read it and everyone looks the same, they're just going to be bored and they're going to set it to the side. But if yours looks different and stands out, it's going to get their attention, and that's something that you definitely want. Get research experience. You can do this as a high school student, you can do this as an undergrad, and be passionate and get your essays read by people. So, you know, you can email me. I've applied to so many programs that it's just ridiculous, and I've gotten a lot of experience writing entry essays. Also, you know, I'm sure Ms. Banger or Ms. Burns or anyone would be happy to help you and happy to read your essay and make sure your application looks good. And at the end of the day, not getting into your top choice school is fine. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't get where you want to go. It just means that it might take you just a little bit longer to get there, and that's okay. That's what I did. It's taking me longer to get where I want to go, but I'm here. So just keep that in mind. And lastly, one of the last things I'm going to say is that these 5 programs here, which are linked in the next slide, are opportunities to work in a lab for students that are in high school. So the Young Scientist programs at WASHU, Tyson Research Center is located near Six Flags. They do more like plant biology. Both of these are in St. Louis, and so is this one at SLU. So apply to those and see if you can get some research during the summer as a high school student. It's a great opportunity for people like you. All right, and then just, I gotta brag on WASHU because I love it here so much. WASHU has 25 Nobel Prize winners. So the Nobel Prize is the most prestigious award in science and philosophy and things like that in the world. So I just wanted to highlight this for you guys to show you that people in St. Louis, every single one of these people worked in St. Louis, and they were awarded the Nobel Prize for the work that they did. And most recently, last week, Charles Rice was awarded the Nobel Prize for discovering hepatitis C, if I'm remembering correctly. So, you know, it's happening now, and it's happening close to home, and this could be you. If you're excited and you're passionate, this could be you. So just keep that in mind. All right, and if you zoned out about 30 minutes ago and didn't hear anything I said, zone back in right now and listen to me for this. It doesn't matter if you like science, doesn't matter what you love, be passionate. Just pick something that you're passionate about. You know, I knew I liked biology when I was young, but I thought I wouldn't be able to do anything with it. I thought, you know, I was just gonna have to settle and do a job that gave me a paycheck, and then I could be happy when I got home. And that's just not the case. I love coming to work every single day. I love what I do, and I don't ever dread coming into work. People told me that people repeatedly told me I would not be able to work in biomedical research. They told me that studying cancer was just completely unrealistic, and that I really had to tone down my expectations of what I wanted of myself. I was told by my advisor at SEMO that I would never be able to get into WASHU as a student, and that I wouldn't be able to get a PhD because my GPA was not high enough. And like I said, I was told over and over, you don't have to be passionate about your work, just go get a paycheck and then go home. And that's just not true. Life is too short. Pick something that makes you happy and makes you excited. You know, if that's something that's going to be going to a trade school, which for some of you that might be going to a trade school to do something you love, then that's fine. If you're passionate about nursing, that's fine, but it doesn't matter. Just realize that there are so many different types of jobs out there that you can do, that surely in one of the millions of jobs, you'll find something that you love. And I was also told that I wouldn't be successful in science as a woman. This is something that's real for women with PhDs. It's harder to get to the top of your field. So far, I have worked in biomedical science, currently study cancer. I went to WASHU for my master's, and I'm going to WASHU for my PhD. I'm working on getting my PhD. I'm passionate about what I do. And I have women mentors with PhDs in science that I can shape my career after to make sure that I do succeed in what I'm wanting. So, all right, thank you guys so much for listening. I've put my email on here. This is my personal, and this is my school email. I'm happy to talk to you guys anytime. I love science and I love school, and I could talk about both of them all day. So, and also here's my LinkedIn. If you think the work that I talked about was cool, I've got projects there. So, all right, let's see. Okay. All right, so yeah, If anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in now. I'm not sure how this works with so many of you, but whatever you want to do. Anybody? All right, well, I'll go ahead and end this. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And like I said, please email me. I would love to talk to you guys about school, about science, anything you want to hear. All right, I'll see you guys. Stop sharing my screen here. Okay.